guys, welcome to a new episode of Style Revival where I take inspiration from historical fashion beauty trends and translate it into a modern day wearable head-to-toe look. Today we are going to be reviving the late Victorian era. So the Victorian era, which ranges roughly from 1830 to the early 1900s, was a very eventful time when it came to fashion trends. Because of the Industrial Revolution, sewing machines were widely available, they were mass-produced, and so was synthetic dye. So it was a lot easier to produce more and kind of more cost-effective clothing, and just more of it in general. It was more easily accessible, and it was much quicker to produce clothing as well. Not only was it quicker and easier to produce and distribute clothing, it was also much quicker and easier to produce and distribute fashion magazines. This is actually an era where women actually started to get into high fashion as we know it nowadays, pretty much. It's very comparable. Just through watching the fashion magazines, and trends changed so quickly. You pretty much had a new trend every season like we have today. And this means that there is a lot of change throughout the Victorian era. You can pretty much see a different style of clothing for every single year. At the beginning of the Victorian era, clothing is very elaborate still, big and kind of extravagant, I would say, lots of frills and little decorations, floral thingies. And then towards the end of the Victorian era, we come into a much more kind of simplified fashion period where the silhouette of dressing changes very much. At first you had these huge big skirts that just poofed out to the side, the bigger the better. The skirts were so big that there are caricatures drawn of them from the period by people who thought it was a ridiculous fashion. Towards the end, the silhouette changes into what we know as the bustle shape, which was pretty much the front and the sides were pretty slim, and then there was this huge poof in the back. I'm sure you've seen this. The Victorian era is quite a popular era to recreate nowadays in various kind of fantasy-ish looks, I would almost say. So Gothic fashion pulls a lot of inspiration from the Victorian era, and steampunk does as well. There are some Victorian influences in the Lolita, in the Japanese Lolita style. So this kind of bustle shape then slims down even more into more of like a clock-shaped skirt, which kind of follows the woman's natural body line for the most part. Or I'm natural, of course it's not natural, because they definitely wore corsets, and very tight-laced ones at that. Yeah, something that came along with this kind of slimmer period was a shift from decoration into tailoring. So instead of having these very elaborate, ruffly pieces of clothing, women started to wear much simpler and more tailored pieces that looked very much inspired by the male fashion. So they started wearing jackets and blouses, and obviously still skirts, but there was definitely a clear influence from kind of male fashion into female fashion. And actually the jackets they wore are super similar to our modern day blazers. So that is why I chose to revive this period today, because it is pretty easy to kind of imitate that feeling through pieces that are available to us nowadays. So we will get to the fashion at the end of the video. I'm going to start with the beauty trends. The hair pretty much follows the same pattern as the skirt sizes and just dress style in general. So we go from big elaborate curls and buns kind of like flowing everywhere into much more kind of sterner hairstyles that are much closer to the head. Yeah, more polished, I'd say, in general. So we see more kind of like tighter top knots and braided styles that are just a lot slimmer and pulled back pretty tightly. We'll get to hair afterwards as well. I'm going to actually start with the makeup. Now, makeup in the Victorian era was actually pretty much a no-go as for most of history, and it was mostly associated with like ladies that worked the night, if you know what I mean. Ladies of a higher social standing were not supposed to wear makeup. The focus was very much on skincare and cosmetics and just making sure your skin looked youthful and beautiful, and you definitely weren't supposed to cover it in products, although women definitely did wear a little bit of rouge and some lip tints, which is something that was done through most periods in history where makeup kind of like wasn't supposed to be worn. So to simulate that look for a kind of more modern wearable look for us nowadays, I'm going to just start with a layer of foundation and concealer, and I'm going to use a foundation that is my natural skin tone, but I am going to use a concealer over my dark circles, which is just a few shades lighter than my natural skin tone. In the Victorian era, it was all about the pale skin. They very much had the notion that rich people were supposed to be paler because obviously they didn't work out in the sun, and it's this whole kind of showing your status in every aspect possible that made women long for the palest skin possible. So I'm going to just kind of brighten my skin up a little bit by using this paler concealer, and then I am going to cover this in a layer of powder to make sure my face is nice and matte and my makeup doesn't go anywhere throughout the day. So moving on to eyebrows. Now in the Victorian period the beauty standard for hair was to be dark, and they just went for a very brunette look in general. So eyebrows were left pretty natural, but of course well groomed as always, and I'm going to use a tinted brow gel today to comb my eyebrows into place and just give them a little bit of a darker tint to kind of enhance that higher contrast brunette look. So I'm going to leave the eyes pretty much bare apart from a little layer of mascara for again a little bit more of a modern feel. And then for the cheeks I'm going to apply a flush of blush on pretty much my entire cheeks, just make this look pretty natural as you can. And then for the lips I'm going to use this lip and cheek tint, and I'm just going to apply this very lightly onto my lips and blend it in with my fingers to again look like a just natural tint on the lips. And there is the makeup all done. So now moving on to the hair, like I mentioned I'm going for more of a kind of tight, a little bit more of a sterner hairstyle today to go with my almost horse riding inspired outfit. So I'm going to start by just combing all of my hair back into a ponytail, and I decided to leave out my bangs today. Now bangs were worn in the Victorian era, but they were worn more as kind of like this poofy poodle type puff in the front. So if you wanted to go for a more authentic Victorian look, you could curl your bangs or kind of like front pieces of hair. I am going for a more kind of definitely more of a modern look today, but as always feel free to shift towards more historical or more modern in whichever way you want. So I decided to just leave my bangs out for a little bit more of a modern look, and when I have pulled all of my hair back into a ponytail I am going to apply loads of hair extensions. Now if you look at photos from the Victorian era, ladies have so much hair, it is ridiculous. I'm sure you've seen those photos of the Victorian ladies with like floor length hair, but ladies that didn't have floor length hair of themselves used artificial hair to kind of fill up their hairstyles. I'm gonna do the same thing. I don't have floor length hair, nor is my hair very thick, so I definitely need a little bit of help in this department. I'm going to apply a few strips of hair extensions, and the way I'm going to do this is I'm going to pin them using a bobby pin to the base of my ponytail. So I'm not using the clips that come on the extensions, I'm just going to poke my bobby pin through the lace that the hair is bonded to and use this to secure it to my ponytail, and this is going to give a little bit more of a flat look and allow me to layer more extensions on top of each other while still maintaining a pretty natural look. So when my ponytail is full enough, I am going to just separate this into 3 strands and braid it like just your regular normal braid, which I'm then going to tie off with a hair elastic and just wrap around the base once. When doing my research for this, I came across lots of photos from this period of ladies who wear their hair in something that is kind of in between a braided top knot and a crown braid. So I decided to go for a top knot instead of a crown braid because it's a little bit more modern and suitable for our day-to-day life, but you could go, you know, for either, again, whichever you prefer. So I'm just going to pin down my braid with loads of bobby pins to make sure it's nice and secure. And there is your Victorian hairstyle done as well. So moving on to the fashion. Now, like I mentioned, I was inspired by kind of the Bustle era or kind of riding outfits. So I started this outfit off with a white blouse, which is kind of more of a flowy material, but the most important thing is that it has a high neckline which closes actually with a bow, and this is something that was worn a lot in the Victorian era, in this kind of period that I'm talking about. Women wore just bows or kind of like scarves, just something tied around their necks. So this blouse is something I found in my closet which comes the closest to that. And then over that I'm wearing a jacket or kind of like a blazer, which is very tailored and beautifully structured, kind of close fitting to the body. And it also has these kind of very ornate buttons which feel very Victorian to me. And it also has a pinstripe, and stripes were definitely popular in the later Victorian era. So on the bottom I decided to go for a pair of light jeans. Now obviously in the Victorian era women would have worn skirts, but again I'm trying to pull this into a modern look, and I feel like with a skirt this would look a little bit too costumey for my liking, so I went with a pair of jeans. And then I'm wearing a pair of brown boots. Some higher boots are definitely the way to go if you're going for a Victorian outfit, and mine actually have a row of buttons. Now in the Victorian era this probably would have been laced rather than buttoned, but yeah, these shoes just have a very Victorian feel. Heels are definitely okay. Heels were worn in the later Victorian era, but you could go for flat booties as well if you prefer that. And now something that is also very important when recreating a Victorian look is to wear a hat. Now obviously our modern day hats aren't made to be worn with a high bun or just a big hairstyle in general, so mine sits on my head a little bit funnily when I wear it now. I would suggest if you are wearing a modern hat with this to go for a little bit of a lower bun so that you can just wear the hat on your head and have the bun underneath. Yeah, mine is kind of balancing on top of my bun, so it looks a little bit funny, but a hat is definitely important for a Victorian outdoors look in any way. And the Victorian hats would have been adorned with feathers and flowers and just lots of decorations. I'm going for a bit of a simpler look, again for my more modern feel, and I just tied a little white ribbon around the hat to match my blazer that I'm wearing today. But that is all. There is your late Victorian Bustle era riding inspired outfit completely done, head to toe. So I really hope you enjoyed this episode of Style Revival, guys. If there is any period you are really looking forward to me doing, be sure to leave a request in the comments below. I will look through and pick out a period for next time. If you like this video, don't forget to give a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel for loads more videos of this type. If you would like to support me on Patreon, I will have a link in the description box as well. Thank you so much. I will have another video here which you may also enjoy. You can go watch next if you like. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you very soon in my next video. Bye!